Hey guys, this is Todd again, and I wanted to talk about another book that I read recently called End of Jobs by Taylor Pearson. It's a book that's not about Steve Jobs of Apple, but it's about the end of employment as we know it, the end of jobs. And the basic premise of this book is that the economy has changed so rapidly that we basically have to change our mindset to be able to live in this sort of new reality that we live in, I guess. Basically, our parents grew up, expecting to work at one corporation or one firm for 40 years to collect a pension, to, take out a mortgage, have a home, raise a family. And what Taylor Pearson is saying is that those rules no longer apply to this generation, the millennials who inherited Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest. Instead, what we have to do, we millennials and everybody who basically is concerned with finding, stable income, I guess, is we have to hustle. That's essentially what he's saying, at least to be successful, because right now what's going on is that technology is developing so rapidly that the middle class is being completely eroded by, robots and other technologies that have basically replaced what humans used to do back in the 90s and 80s and 70s. And Taylor Pearson basically cites information that shows that employment rates aren't actually going up at all, not even post-recession, which happened in 2008. Actually, the number of jobs are going down, and he attributes this decline to the outsourcing of jobs from the U.S. to developing countries and also to robots. And this is actually a similar message to the one that James Altucher mentions in his book, which is called Choose Yourself. The Choose Yourself series basically works from the same premise. So basically Taylor is saying the same thing. He's saying that the jobs that we thought we would get, we don't have anymore because society has changed so much. And he says the thing that, is going to basically make or break you in this new economy is whether you can fully embrace this new economy. And he says that, and this is one thing that I find really interesting, he says that people still haven't caught up to the changes yet that are in this economy, which I think is really interesting. He's saying that people are still living as if we are in the economy of the 90s, that the 2008 recession was just a minor blip, and that things will get back to quote-unquote normal. And so you see a trend of people, being unemployed for a while and then deciding that they'll go back to the university or they'll go back to college. But what Taylor is saying is that that's not going to work anymore. Going back to college and getting a skill to then work at a job is not going to work because the jobs are no longer around anymore. Those jobs are gone because of the robots and the outsourcing. So he says that despite the fact that, the employment has changed drastically, the way people are employed and the way that work gets done in our society, despite all these major changes, people are still behaving like that's not happening. Maybe they're in denial, or they're kind of wishing for something else. Taylor doesn't speculate on that point, but I think it's sort of intimated as you go through the book and read what he's saying. The other really interesting thing that Taylor brings up is the idea that those who understand what's happening are going to have no other choice but to embrace entrepreneurialism. I guess that's the word you would use, entrepreneurialism or entrepreneurship. he says that the people who understand what's going on are going to have to, or they're going to basically make the decision that they are no longer going to abide by the rules of the old economy. They're going to follow the rules of the new economy, which basically require you to become your own self-employed person, your own business owner, your own entrepreneur. So what we're seeing basically now is that the most successful people in this new economy are basically entrepreneurs, self-starters, people who get work done, people who can basically find ways to feed themselves and not rely on an employer to do that for them. Because the old way of doing things, relying on an employer to feed you and give you health care and all those other goodies, is basically no longer the case, if it ever was the case even. And Taylor goes so far as to say that basically if you stay at a job, let's say you are fortunate enough to have a job even, if you stay at the job, you are actually putting yourself at grave risk. You are putting yourself in harm's way because you are basically preventing yourself from taking the leap and the transformation that you need to grow and become a more prosperous and self-sufficient person in the way society is developing. And that is a really strong message because people think that the more secure route to take is to stay at a job, to stay safe and secure with an employer. But Taylor does not say that. He says that that's actually even more risky than striking out on your own and creating your own business and trying to find ways to feed yourself. So that is a really powerful message, one that I never really thought of before. And it's something that you all should really kind of pause to consider because, it's happening, actually. You can see the trends that are going on. And I mean, if you look at the research that Taylor brings up and even just the research that you read in papers and magazines, I mean, the trends are there. It's kind of hard not to consider them. The other interesting thing is that, the idea that the society is not going to revert back. It's not going to revert back to the way it was. And that is also what Taylor is basically saying. He's saying that society is going to move forward with or without your thinking about whether it should be this or it should be that, or, irrespective of whether you think that society should be back in the 90s again, it doesn't matter. It's going to continue to move forward and technology will continue to develop and people will continue to get outsourced and the middle class will continue to be eroded. And the people who are going to prosper in this new world are going to be the people who self-start, the people who start their own businesses, and the people who decide to, and this is what Taylor says, quote unquote, invest in entrepreneurialism or entrepreneurship. I'm not quite sure what the word is, but you get the idea. He's saying that those who invest in starting up their own companies are going to be the ones that really reap the benefits of the changes that are taking place today. And, you can consider basically a lot of skills that basically require one to do that, like SEO and WordPress, all these different types of skills that will require you to have your own business. A lot of them are digital. And this kind of leads Taylor to one other note that I probably should have brought up at the beginning of this little podcast. And that is basically that there's another way of getting kind of investing in becoming a self-starter, and that's through apprenticeships. He actually mentioned this in another podcast on the Tropical MBA, and I think Side Hustle Nation was another interview he had where he brought up this idea of apprenticeships, how they've been working for centuries, and now we're going back to them, or maybe they're becoming more popular. I think that's kind of the idea that I basically was able to get from what he was saying in these interviews. But basically, apprenticeships work They've always worked, and they will definitely work today, because there are people in this world who have cracked the code to making money in this new economy, and those are the people that you want to gravitate towards to learn the craft so that you can be able to take care of yourself. And that's what people have done since, the beginning of time. And this is what Taylor has said repeatedly in his interviews and in his book, is that people have basically relied on others to help them learn how to sustain themselves, to take care of themselves, to become self-sufficient. Because the institutions that we have in place right now, the educational institutions, like, high school and college and university, those don't work anymore. So that is kind of the message. That is the message in a nutshell with End of Jobs. So I really liked this book a lot. I thought it was just really compelling. There were the messages I agreed with. I don't read a lot of books that I agree with, and a lot of the books I don't need to agree with, because they're related to programming, and in programming, something either is or it isn't. But with this book, you could definitely, I guess, take a stance. But I found a lot of the messages really resonated with me, really resonated with my experience as a traveler and as a college graduate and as a former welfare recipient. So a lot of these messages really kind of rung true for me, and I really did like the way he brought up research and how he cited many different resources. And I mean, he had so much help done with this book. He had a lot of people help him out, and a lot of the people that did help him out are really reputable, really awesome people that are actually crushing it in this economy and doing really well. So he's had a really good team of friends and neighbors and, other people who are helping him out. So, I mean, this book was really well written and really well researched, and so many of the points I think are just completely dead on. It's really hard to argue with them, because, you just have to read the news and you see the changes that are taking place all around you. So, take my message for what it's worth. I mean, you'll have to read the book yourself and determine for yourself what the truth is. But I just felt like I wanted to share my synopsis of the book and also my personal beliefs about it, because I felt like this is a book that people should definitely be reading, because it has some really, really powerful messages and a really interesting perspective that you don't get a lot of. So anyway, I appreciate anyone who takes the time out of their day to listen to this. I know that I probably don't have a very huge following right now, but hey, you got to start somewhere, right? So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to let me, to send them to me. And if not, well, I guess I will make another podcast in the future, and I hope to have you as a listener again. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time, or speak to you next time. Take care.